Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Prosper Central 101. My name is Chris, and today joining me we have Keelan, Grayson, and Daniel for part 3 of our Lions breakdown. So during part 1 and part 2, we talked about the Lions offense in part 1, and in part 2, we hit on the defense and special teams. So for those of you guys who are not able to check out either of those, definitely go back and revisit what we think about the Lions roster. In part 3, we have our special guest here in Grayson for his first time on the channel to give us a little bit more insight into the other division teams, including Chicago, who we see in week 1, Green Bay, who we play against in week number 2, and the Minnesota Vikings, who we'll see twice later on in the year, including a potentially pivotal week 17 matchup. So we'll start with you, Grayson. What are your thoughts on the division and the way it shapes up this year, including Detroit, but just like in terms of Chicago, Minnesota, and Green Bay?
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of the uh, better divisions in football. Looking at some of your season projections, I think you've got all of them pretty low. That's just personal opinion, though. I think it's one of the harder divisions, if not the hardest, to project. You know, and even if you don't think it is the best division or the second best division, it's definitely one of the most balanced divisions from top to bottom. Not a lot of separation for any of the teams, in my opinion.
Nice. Daniel, this is your first time for this particular video. Unfortunately, you weren't able to make it to part 1 or part 2. So what do you think, just in general, about the Lions roster and how it compares to the rest of the division?
Yeah, Chris, I think the roster compares relatively competitively to any of our division rivals. Um, I think that the big strength of this team is definitely going to be its passing offense. Um, I think that they hope that the passing defense will hold up, but we will see, especially with a run-oriented um, front seven there. That may not provide quite the pass rush that we expect to be able to compete with the likes of Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. Um, in terms of how it's situated within the division, I think that Matthew Stafford is clearly second best quarterback in the division. Some people would say Kirk Cousins is
It's
better. I would disagree with those people heavily. Um, but and then in terms of the Minnesota Vikings, I think that their passing offense took a major hit with the loss of Stephon Diggs, and their passing defense also took a hit with the loss of basically their whole secondary. Um, so when we think about the Vikings, I don't think they're going to be as competitive this year. I think they'll be like a pretty average team, but I don't see them being like the good to great team that they've been under Zimmer for large stretches of this tenure. I think Chicago will need to bank on progression from Mitch Trubisky um, in order to progress. If they don't get that progression, I don't think that they're in contention for the division either. I think it's realistically Green Bay's probably to take, but if certain things go their way, maybe they could contend for Green Bay.
Yeah, you bring up a pretty good point about Mike Zimmer and his tenure with the Minnesota Vikings. Is they've been relatively up and down for most of his time there. 10 and 6, 7 and 9, 10 and 6, 6 and 10, 10 and 6, 8 and 8, 10 and 6. Like, so they're pretty much like one of those teams where last year they were in one of their 10 and 6, one of their good years. So is this year they kind of fall back and regress to the mean a little bit like they have done in the last couple of seasons under Zimmer? So that's definitely something to keep in mind, especially with all their losses, as you pointed out, specifically at corner. But not just corner either. They also lost Everson Griffin. They also lost Stephon Diggs, a wide receiver. I'm pretty sure they also lost Kyle Rudolph, a tight end.
Linval Joseph.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
defensive tackle. Yeah, so they lost quite a bit.
Oh, I think they have Rudolph still.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought Irv Smith was supposed to start, but we'll see how
No.
that ends up, I guess. So
It appears, according to Wikipedia, he's still in the Vikings.
interesting. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how that Minnesota team ends up shaping up. But yeah, so your thoughts, Keelan, on other three teams in the division?
Yeah. I think this division, I think the Bears, Vikings, and Packers are slowly regressing. Bears, I mean, start with the Bears. I mean, their QB situation isn't ideal, regardless if they end up starting Trubisky or Foles for the majority of the season. Neither of them are going to really play too well, in my opinion. I think their offense, aside from that, is pretty average. I mean, I like the running back room with Tariq Cohen and Montgomery. The receivers are, outside of Robinson, not really existent, but they have a decent offensive line. Their defense, well, their team really is known for their defense both now and historically. I mean, they got one of the better edge rushers in the league with Khalil Mack. Their secondary is pretty good. So, I mean, I think they're getting worse. But in terms of the Vikings, I think they're pretty good. I mean, all depends on Kirk Cousins, really. What kind of Kirk Cousins are you going to get? I mean, I don't think the offense got too much worse. I mean, they lost Diggs, but they replaced him with rookie Jefferson. I mean, their offensive line's probably below average, but it's getting better. Their defense lost a little bit of talent, but they brought in Ngakoue. They still have a really good linebacking core. They have a really good secondary. I'm a big fan of that Vikings defense, so I think they're pretty good. And Packers, they're a good team. Aaron Rodgers, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Aaron Jones, one of the better running backs. Devontae Adams, one of the better receivers. They don't really have a receiver room other than Adams. They're not really a great tight end. Their offensive line's above average. And their defense is pretty average. I mean, not quite as good as the Vikings, but Kenny Clark there, Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, both really good pass rushers. Their secondary is pretty good. I mean, probably pretty average. But, I mean, all in all, this is a tough division. It's going to be a lot of fun watching the Lions play 6 games against these 3 teams.
Overall, something else that I found interesting is that this is and I didn't quite know this until we were going through these teams, but all of these teams are going to look to establish the run. All of these teams are going to look to use their physicality to open up the passing game. None of them are really fat pass first teams necessarily. And 2 of them, in terms of Minnesota, Green Bay, are sort of like built in that Shanahan zone run type style, whereby they do a lot of bootleg, a lot of play action off the run. So run defense is going to be tremendously important in this division for sure.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic point. And you actually bring up an even better point about the whole Shanahan thing too. Is the Vikings' new offensive coordinator is Gary Kubiak, who replaces Stefanski, who went to the Cleveland Browns, who is a part of that whole Denver Broncos system of play. And then Matt LaFleur, the Green Bay head coach, was one of the players one of the coaches rather, that was a part of that whole Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan coaching staff in Washington under Mike Shanahan for a couple of years there. So LaFleur has that direct distinction from that Shanahan offense, and Kubiak as well has some very strong ties to that, and we see that play out pretty consistently with the success of Aaron Jones and Dalvin Cook, who are 2 of the better running backs in the entire league, in my opinion. Specifically, Dalvin Cook, who is very, very, very good when healthy. So, Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how much that run defense plays a factor in the entire division, and I think that's why the Lions have built the team the way that they have, and really trying to focus on that run defense. Especially, and the other thing to keep in mind with that too is also the potential weather factors that come into play with that. Playing in Chicago at Soldier Field, playing in Green Bay at Lambeau Field, maybe not so much Detroit and Minnesota who have domes, uh, but having to deal with those kind of conditions on occasion, specifically late in the year or in the playoffs, even more relevant in that December, January, even November timeframe. That's very good reason for the way that those teams are built that way. Actually, Grayson, I'll ask you this: how do you think that the Bears' run offense compares to the other three teams in the division in Detroit, Chicago, and Green Bay, or in Detroit, Minnesota, and Green Bay?
I think it definitely is going to come behind both Green Bay and Minnesota. And if Kerryon Johnson can stay healthy for a decent amount of the season, I think it'll definitely be behind theirs as well. But it is, in my opinion, the single most important factor for the Bears to get back to where they want to be. You know, the year they went 12-4 and made the playoffs, they were like a top 10 rush offense, had the 11th most yards and the 6th most attempts. And then last year, when everything all went downhill, they went all the way down to 27th in yards and 28th in touchdowns. And it wasn't pretty because they weren't able to run the ball. And it messed up the defense, which, you know, some people say took a step back. But I think that's mostly just based off of the inability for Chicago to establish the run.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and that's also part of the issue that we've had, in my observation, in Detroit, is that running the ball helps with the defense and keeping the defense off the field. It helps move possessions and keep possessions alive, and so on and so forth. So that's a very good and interesting point. And yeah, Matt Forte was kind of like that main guy for Chicago for a long time. And hopefully for Chicago's sake, David Montgomery can kind of help refill that role a little bit away. Do you think he has the
Yeah.
potential to kind of step into that over the next couple of years?
I think he does. Yeah, I'm still high on him. The offensive line had a lot of injuries. You know that's Kyle Long missed most of the year, and now he's retired. That entire right side of the offensive line needed revamping. So I do think we'll see a better year than last year. We've got new offensive coordinators. We've got revamped coaching staff and whatnot. I think it'll be better than it was last year. I mean, it's hard to get much worse than 27th in rushing, but hopefully he can excel in the run game and then help out check downs in the pass game and whatnot, and keep the offense moving and on the field.
Just with a thing on Montgomery, I was extremely high on him coming out a couple of years ago. I had him, running back one above Josh Jacobs, who's a first round pick, and obviously he's now like a top 7, top 10 running back. So, I have high hopes for Montgomery. Is this his second? No, his third year, right?
Second.
Second. Okay. The drafts have gotten me confused. They blend together. Like, anyways, I have high hopes for Montgomery and as well as Tariq Cohen, who I think is an exceptional player. Special teams, receiving threat, and even a pretty good runner.
So yeah,
Something
you go, Daniel.
I would like to ask Grayson, if you don't mind, is about Montgomery. At least from my perspective, and granted, I'm not watching 16 games of Chicago Bears film, so therefore I'm not quite educated enough to make this call. But from what I saw and from what I sort of gleaned from other smart people that I follow, Montgomery kind of struggled a little bit with being able to go north-south as opposed to east-west. Is that a problem for him, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it was more a willingness to go north-south, always wanting to make a bigger play than to just take your 3 yards, be happy with it for right now, and then the big play will come. Always trying to create, and looking over his shoulder and seeing Tariq Cohen right there, busting off 20-yard runs, unbelievable catches, punt returns, and whatnot. I think it kind of messed with him mentally, but it is definitely he's at his best when he was willing to run, and I think he can get back to that. In college, I think Iowa, they've always got those, or no, Iowa State. Pardon me. They don't have much, so I was hoping that they would be able to play it similar almost, because he's having to make it happen himself with all those injuries. But it was a almost unwillingness to go north-south, which I think will undoubtedly be better this year.
Okay.
So another thing that you touched on before we kind of went into the Montgomery thing was new coordinators. So one thing that changed last offseason, well, not the most recent one, but the one before that, was the defensive coordinator and losing Vic Fangio to Denver. So what are your thoughts about how the defense has changed a little bit under, I believe, Chuck Pagano still, right?
It is Pagano, yeah.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts about how the defense is looked under Chuck Pagano, and do you see maybe some improvement or regression, or what do you think the pathway is for that defense to refine that success they had under Vic Fangio, if that's even possible?
Yeah, I was terrified to lose Fangio and have Pagano come in, but I was very, very happy with how the defense played last year. I think they were still unanimously looked at as a top 10 defense, still top in the league. They've got talent all across the board. And I was worried about losing Fangio. But Pagano came in, he did well. And that's all I could ask for. There weren't many changes, which is, I think, what my biggest fear was that he would come in and change it. And he kept it, from everything I could tell, pretty similar. And then if you're looking for personnel, I was bummed to lose Leonard Floyd, but then to replace him with Robert Quinn, which, is expensive, but with Floyd's contract running out and, you're bummed you're losing your first round pick, but in a perfect world, he ends up just about as good as Robert Quinn. So I'm looking forward to having him hopefully help out Mac and have Mac help out him. I think they'll be, everyone's talking about the Smiths in Green Bay. I think they'll be right up there as one of the best duos in the league. And then aside from Floyd, the only other person that we really lost, or were the two people, were Prince Amukamara and HaHa Clinton Dix. And I was bummed to lose both of them, but both of them have since been cut by the teams that signed them. So I don't think they're going to be as big subtractions as I thought they were going to be. I am worried about that corner position opposite Kyle Fuller. But this defense could really be as good as it was in 2018. I'm not going to say it will be. The big key in what everyone was saying was the step back was they had almost 40 turnovers, and then it dropped to like 19 last year. And I'm not expecting 40 turnovers or anything, but somewhere right in between. They should still be a top 5 defense.
Yeah,
easily.
40 is incredibly high.
Yeah, it was absurd. One of the best defenses ever in 2018, in my opinion.
So another guy that you just, I don't know if you skipped over him or if you didn't mention him on purpose, that you guys lost, the OP is actually really high on him, is Nick Kwiatkowski. So what kind of role, or what player, I guess, do you kind of expect to step up and fill his role after he left to go to Vegas?
Yeah, so he was, and the reason I didn't really bring it up is bottom line, he was our third string linebacker. And, he was fantastic. And we had injuries to Danny Trevathan and Roquan Smith at different points last year. And Nick stepped in and he played fantastic. And I was so proud of him, so happy he got a contract. And it will be a bummer to lose him. I am excited to see another year of progression for Roquan Smith. I think he could be a potential, top 5, top 10 middle linebacker. Ie Buniwe, who we drafted last year, he'll take that third linebacker role, which was Kwiatkowski's. And before that, it was your favorite guy, Christian Jones. So they've had success from their linebacker depth. They've shown an ability to get something from guys who usually wouldn't. That I'm not super stressed about that loss.
Interesting. So, Keelan, we already had Daniel ask a question. Keelan, is there anything that you have that you want to ask Grayson about Chicago?
I'm more so curious about what's the secondary looking like? We were talking about
Eddie
Jalen
Jackson.
Johnson, and Eddie Jackson, right? But who's their nickel corner and the safety across from Eddie Jackson?
So at nickel we're gonna have Buster Skrine.
Yep, Screen.
And we had him last year to replace Bryce Callahan.
Right.
And Callahan, obviously one of the best nickel defenders in the league, who joined Fangio in Denver. And Screen came in, he was about average. He got burned a bunch. He made some plays a bunch. Not really gonna go too much in depth with him. He could be upgraded. He could also be much worse. I think to replace Clinton Dix, it's almost gonna be a safety by committee. I don't know how many teams do that really, but they signed Tashawn Gibson, former Brown. I can't remember what team.
Jaguar.
Niner.
Jaguar.
Okay, he's played for a bunch of teams. They signed him. They've still got Deion Bush, DeAndre Houston Carson from a couple drafts back. He mostly plays special teams, but Sherrick McManus will get some snaps, I assume. But that would be the main safety opposite Eddie Jackson.
Cool.
So one thing that's often discussed about the Packers, or not the Packers, the Bears, is the impact of Khalil Mack and the Khalil Mack trade. So looking back on it, it's been 2 years, 3 years now?
Camp of 2018.
This will be his third season, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so it's been about 3 years since the trade happened. Do you still think that was a good move?
Oh yeah, 100%. And it was big move then. I was skeptical then, while totally excited to have a guy like Khalil Mack come over. Even looking at it now, I mean, there's no other player on the team that's as marketable as him, just from a financial standpoint, if you want to look at it that way. He's an all-pro. He's, in my opinion, the best edge in the league. He's just fantastic. Does everything you could ever ask for, your defensive end from your linebacker. He can cover, he can get to the passer, or he can run stop. He is all around one of the best players in the league.
Nice.
And to add a contrary argument, or not really argument, but I don't think the Raiders are regretting that trade too much either. Obviously, they let go of a top pass rusher in this league, a pass rusher heavy league. But they got some draft picks. They got Damon Arnett. I think he was the Bears pick. I think so.
I don't remember who the Bears picks were that the Raiders.
I think it was Josh Jacobs and Damon Arnett, if I'm not mistaken. And Jacobs has turned into a top 10 running back, and Arnett had, viewed as a reach undrafted, but he had an exceptional camp, despite having a broken finger or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he still showed out on camp. He won that spot, the starting spot. So I don't think the Raiders can be too upset with that, especially with their pass rushing group is looking a bit better now with Cleveland Ferrell and Max Crosby, who had a tremendous rookie year, or I think he's a rookie year, second year guy. Anyways, so what I think both teams aren't really regretting that trade, to be honest with you.
Interesting. So, is there anything else that you really have about Chicago? Just in general, Chicago. We'll get a little bit more into Lions-Bears matchup in a little bit, but just Chicago in general.
Yeah, just to jump over to the offense real quick, I'm really excited for the Ted Ginn pickup. The past couple years, we've been super surprised from Taylor Gabriel and how he was able to perform, and then he was let go, and we replaced him with Ted Ginn, and I think he steps in that same exact role. Could be a big surprise. Him and Tariq Cohen, kind of that similar speed guy. I think it could be a lot of fun to watch him. Just something to look for moving forward.
Adding on to that, I'm a big fan of Anthony Miller there. I think Anthony Miller, right? Yeah, I really like him. He's a good slot guy or a receiver too. I think he's a tremendous player, and I think he's only going to get better.
I sure hope so.
Nice. So moving on to the Green Bay Packers now. We'll start with Daniel on this one. I know that you're a huge Aaron Rodgers guy, or at least it comes off that way. What do you think about the Packers' chances of having success beyond Aaron Rodgers this season? The rest of the team around him.
Well, I think that the Packers' offense is going to continue to be a rush-heavy offense. I think that we saw that with the moves that the Packers made in the draft, namely not addressing receiver at all.
Drafting a fullback in day 2.
And instead going with a fullback / halfback / tight end, whatever.
Yeah, H-back, tight end, fullback, yep.
And also going with a running back in round 2 in A.J. Dillon. So no matter what, this Packers team is shaping up to be a very rush-heavy offense. And so really, I think I'll start with Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and A.J. Dillon, and whether or not they can get going behind that offensive line to set up the play action for Aaron Rodgers. And they did it successfully last year. I know that you're not a big fan of not LaFleur, but I think that he's done all right. I think that he's brought a different sort of culture to Packers from a very pass-first culture, a very finesse culture with Mike McCarthy, to all of a sudden it's what a blue-collar type team building idea. So I think that the Packers are pretty good. I think that they'll continue to be pretty good. I have no reason to believe that they'll be maybe not 12-4, but I see no reason that they can't be 10-6, 11-5, something like that. So overall, those are my thoughts. Ooh, one more guy. I think that Jace Sternberger, last year he got hurt, and this year he's returning from injury. I think if there's a guy to keep an eye on the potential breakout guy, I think it could be Jace Sternberger.
Interesting. Okay, Grayson, your thoughts on Green Bay?
So Green Bay, I like their secondary. I love their secondary. And one guy who I think is going to be unbelievably important for them, and I think he's a relatively overrated guy, but I think Kenny Clark is going to just be unbelievably important. They don't have a lot of run defense, in my opinion, outside of Kenny Clark, that if he were to go down, I think they'll be fine. They've got the great pass rushers with Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith. They've got the elite secondary, Adrian Amos, Jair Alexander, Savage. But if Clark goes down, I think you're able to run that team into the ground, literally, with your run game. I don't see a lot of defensive line talent or inside linebacker talent there. I do think they'll be very, very good against the pass. Aaron Rodgers, you can never doubt him, even if the Packers look like they're starting to with that Jordan Love draft pick. Devontae Adams is elite, not much behind him. That offensive line's got a lot of good names. I think we'll take a step back this year from the Packers we are maybe used to, sadly. Or I guess not, sadly. Well, the Packers we're used to would be the sad part.
Yeah.
But they still have talent all over the place.
Cool. And Keelan?
Well, just to piggyback on what the other guys have said, I'm a big fan of that three-headed running attack with, Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and AJ Dillon. The receiver room, like I said, is pretty garbage outside of Devontae Adams. And, it was garbage before the draft, and that was something, I think pretty much everyone expected them to look to improve. And, well, unfortunately for Aaron Rodgers, they didn't. And, their offensive line is still one of the best in the NFL. Their secondary is elite. Their pass rushing is elite, and I'm not too big of a fan of their off-ball linebackers. Christian Kirksey's one of them. They lost Blake Martinez, which is probably a good thing because he's absolutely garbage, one of the worst linebackers in the NFL, and somehow he earned a big payday from the Giants.
I love Gettleman.
Yeah.
We can say that, right? Because Scott isn't here.
So, we have about, 4 minutes left? Unfortunately, my screen's kind of glitching. But yeah, it looks like we have about 4 minutes left to kind of go over the Vikings. So I don't know which one you guys want to start. Maybe Keelan? What
Sure,
do you
but
take on Minnesota?
Minnesota, I mean, they're an interesting team. Obviously, Kirk Cousins is an average quarterback. He's not like below average to the point where starting him's going to lose you any games, but he's a pretty good quarterback. He can definitely lead that team to the playoffs. The running back two-headed monster with Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison's a good group of guys. I like both of them. The receiver room is pretty loaded despite losing Stephon Diggs to the Bills. I mean, I guess loaded isn't the correct word, but they got Adam Thielen, they got B.C. Johnson, and then they got rookie Justin Jefferson, who are all guys I like. Offensive line, below average, but they've been working through the draft. They got drafted Ezra Cleveland, the tackle from Boise State this year, Brian O'Neill a couple of years ago. Defensively, their defensive line's pretty good. They just traded for Ngakwe, and they kept Hunter, right?
Yeah, Daniel Hunter just signed an extension.
I get Griffin and Hunter always confused. Anyways, Hunter, he's good, but he's going to be on IR for at least the first 3 weeks. Linebacker group is one of the best in the league. They got Anthony Barr, Eric Hendricks, both really good against the pass, and they're still pretty good against the run. Their secondaries, the corner group's young, but they got Mike Hughes and Jeff Gladney, and then their secondaries, Anthony Harris and Harrison Smith are both top 10 safeties in the league.
Cool. Daniel?
Something else that I find interesting about Minnesota that Grayson didn't quite mention was their tight end group. Especially with Kubiak. Kubiak loves the tight ends, loves those double tight end sets. And I think that Kyle Rudolph's still plugging away there. Still a solid ass receiving valve. And then I think that if you look at Irv Smith Jr., he had a really nice year last year. And I expect him to have a big year this year. There's no reason not to expect him to take a progressive leap this year. And really, with the amount of volume I'm sure he'll be expecting with the loss of Diggs, I expect big things from him.
Yep.
Cool. And Grayson, you have about a minute left to kind of wrap up the Vikings section.
Yeah, real quick, just because I know we're running out of time. Those corners, I would be very scared as a Vikings fan to run out onto the field every day with those as my starting corners. It was a bad spot for them last year, and then they let everyone go. But I don't think they did. They drafted 2 corners, 3 corners. But I would like to see a free agent signing somewhere in there to get some day one impacts. Definitely hope, or they should definitely hope that they play above their abilities.
Right. I mean, Gladney and Hughes are about the extent of that room.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot. I'm probably end up going over, but I'm gonna end up talking a little bit about the veteran mentor side of that. Because one thing, like we talked about this during the first couple parts, is having those veteran mentors, right? I think we're gonna see that pay off with Trufant mentoring Okuda and Imani here.
Yeah.
And the Vikings don't really have that. In the sense of guys who can mentor Holton Hill and Jeff Gladney and Mike Hughes. So I think that, I think that that's kind of going to be the one thing that really sets those two groups apart for the coming season is that the Lions are going to have veterans in Justin Coleman at nickel and Desmond Trufant who have experience, who have been on Super Bowl caliber teams, and who have been in the league a while as a top nickel corner and the number one corner in Trufant. So it's going to be very interesting to see if the Vikings kind of lack that experience and that communication element that are really just crucial to that secondary and how quickly they're going to be able to gel and mold. And they also are without Daniel Hunter for the first 3 weeks of the year on injured reserve as well. He was just put on IR the day that we were recording this. So that is something to keep in mind as well. Is not only are you going to have that initial first 3 week issue with the communication and so on and so forth, you're going to have to rely really heavily on Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris in the back end. But you're also going to be without a little bit of a pass rush early on. Yannick Ngakoue is probably going to be your main, if not only, pass rusher in terms of that defensive line for the first 3 weeks of the season, if not longer. So definitely going to be really interesting to see how the Vikings end up coming together over the course of the year, especially with the Lions not playing them until after the halfway point in the season. Both of our games come in the second half of the year. So, with that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, learned a thing or two. And we also have one more part coming up where we're going to be going over the Lions season predictions and breaking down the week 1 game versus the Chicago Bears. So with that said, see you guys again in part number 4. And don't forget to check out the first 2 parts if you missed them before.